Hi there. Looking at something from the Goo Goo Dolls. This was secondhand. The sticker's been peeled off. I think this was 50 cents. The album Dizzy Up the Girl, which I think was their biggest album. This came out in 1998. So if you look at the track listing, that's not really showing up, is it? Pink. Uh, I'll read them out. Let's go. Dizzy, Slide. So you might have heard both. You probably have heard Slide. You might have heard Dizzy. Broadway, January Friend, Black Balloons. That was also a single. Bulletproof, Amigon, Amigoni. I don't know how you pronounce that. All Eyes on Me, Fall Forever, Acoustic number 3, Iris, Extra Pale, This Place, Name, and Slave Girl. So what they've done there, it says includes the hits Iris, Slide, and Broadway, plus an exclusive, an Australasian exclusive 2 bonus tracks. The 2 bonus tracks, I assume, are Name and Slave Girl, because Name was from their previous album. Name was up until this point was their biggest song. I'd say their 2 biggest songs are Name and Iris. So Name is one of those songs where you know it even if you don't know it, because it was actually it was top 5 on the Billboard in the US. I don't think it ever did that kind of successful placement over here, but it was still around to the point, because I remember one day, the first time I realized that song Name was by the Goo Goo Dolls is when I was at karaoke once in Japan with a group of people, and someone chose that song. And I was like, I know this song, and I looked at it and said Goo Goo Dolls. I was like, oh, that's a Goo Goo Dolls song. Goo Goo Dolls song. Oh, I didn't know that. So what they did is that was kind of a technique. I guess maybe they still do it now. They don't really sell albums anymore, but where a band would, to push the sales of their newer album, they would put some of their biggest songs on it as bonus tracks, which I think it obviously is a good sales technique, but it's kind of admitting. I can't imagine Metallica putting Master of Puppets and One as bonus tracks on the Black Album, for example. It would kind of be like saying, well, yeah, don't bother buying our older albums. We'll stick the big hits on this one. Just get this one. That's good enough. But it did happen. I've got a few other albums where bands have done that, where they kind of slip in some of their older hits onto their newer albums as a ploy to engender sales. Um, so this album was pretty big. It says Dizzy Up the Girl was their most successful album to date, selling over 4 million copies. I don't know if that's 4 million in the US or worldwide. I'd say it's probably just the US. Because that song, Iris, seemed to be huge, seemed to be played a lot on radio and TV in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I believe it has some sort of record for its time spent on charts. Don't know which chart. I guess the Billboard singles chart. I don't know. Excuse me. Um, but yeah, it was the album itself got to number 15. Okay, so well this the information here I've got here contradicts. It says it did 5 times platinum in the US. This album for 5 million sales, and then you know I guess another million worldwide. So it's probably 6 million worldwide. That sounds about what I'd expect. Now, Goo Goo Dolls were that kind of music that, how do you describe it? Like on their Discogs page, they say, so because they'd been around since 1986. So this is 12 years into their career, and it was their 6th studio album. And apparently, their early career they were punk, and then got more kind of in the alternative rock in the early 90s, following the trend. And then by the time they got to whatever album that name was on in 1995, they were going for more of that changing sound. I don't even know what you would call it. There was a period there in the mid to late 90s, and I don't even know what you'd call this. It's not really post grunge, because post grunge I think is heavier, and bands like the Goo Goo Dolls, what they often do is have this acoustic guitar up the front of the mix in their sound, quite a jangly acoustic guitar. So I'd say them, Goo Goo Dolls, Matchbox 20, Tonic. There are other ones in it. Just right now, they're completely out of my mind. Where they created a brighter yet still somewhat introspective sound as compared to grunge alternative rock of the early 90s. So yeah, they call it alternative rock, pop rock, power pop. But I think I'm sure there is something written about that time of music, the kind of brief period in the mid late 90s, maybe even early 2000s. And other people have described it better and explained it, and I can't really do it. My brain's a bit mushed up at the moment, but yeah, it'd be interesting to kind of think about that, or research that further, as to see what is the direct line. Soul Asylum. Soul Asylum, I kind of put as a band that bridged those two. Because Soul Asylum, yeah, I didn't really know that much about Soul Asylum. I remember I had that album. I think it was Misery, and of course I'd heard Runaway Train. But I felt their sound kind of bridged that as well, and were kind of that movement, if you want to call it that. But anyway, the songs on this, like I said, then some of the songs are not bad. That song Slides, okay. It's kind of a catchy rock, mainstream rock type song. Same with Dizzy. Iris, everyone's heard it so many times now that it's kind of, oops, sorry. It's one of those songs where you almost don't hear the song itself. You just hear the sound that has been bled into your head for the last 25 years. It's not a bad song, I guess. If a bit schmaltzy. It was written for that movie, The City of Angels, with was it Nicolas Cage? Was it Nicolas Cage? It was Meg Ryan. I mean, I watched it at the time when it came out, or about a year after it came out. I think Meg Ryan's playing a doctor or a nurse, and she can see an angel or something, and then the angel can choose to be mortal. Maybe I'm mixing up two movies here, but it was certainly on that soundtrack, the City of Angels soundtrack. And then, like I said, they threw Name on there. All the rest of the songs on the album, it really has a similar sound. Some of them kind of have a little bit extra rock in them, I guess, kind of harking back to the earlier sound of the early 90s, late 80s. But they certainly had a sound, and they kind of stuck to that sound, I'd say. But it's kind of this kind of music doesn't really exist anymore, or does it? Like, I was thinking, what is just the straight ahead rock music nowadays? I guess there is. Like, there's bands that I see and hear about, but I've never actually listened to them. For example, Imagine Dragons. I've never heard a song by them. Or is it 21 Pilots? I think that's their name. Maybe they're the bands that fill that gap that these kinds of guys held in that time, and that other bands have also held. I'm not sure. The main guy's there is I think John Resnick. Should have checked that before I made it, shouldn't I? And He was fairly popular. Had very yeah, that haircut. When I think of him, I think of that haircut, that kind of layered over one side with blonde highlights haircut. Yes, it is Johnny Reznik. Reznik. Spelled R-Z-E-Z. I guess what's that? Is that Polish? When you put Z's directly after other consonants, but they're not really sounded. It looks Polish, or it could be other kind of Central Eastern European country name. And Robbie Takak. Takak? He's the bassist. Those Johnny Reznik and Robbie Takak. I'm not sure which one is Robbie Takak. They've been in the band since the beginning, and the band's still operating today. I guess on the nostalgia circuit to a certain extent, like most of those bands do. I haven't heard anything new from them, and when I say I haven't heard anything new, I haven't actively listened to them ever, other than this album. Maybe they are still releasing new music that gets played on the radio, but I would doubt that. So here's the most recent update. In June 2021, interview published on YouTube, Johnny Reznik revealed the band was working on a 14th studio album, which was released in 2022. How's this for a nothing answer? When asked about how the album differs from their previous works, Reznik claimed that the band had decided to approach both writing and recording in an alternative way. Specifically, the band used earlier forms of production which they had utilized prior to the digital era in the music industry. That just sounds like, there's nothing different. We recorded in a slightly different way. Produced most of the album myself. Hoped the album would sound more experimental than the band's past releases. He believed it would not receive much radio play. The band announced their new album is called Chaos and Bloom. There's not much else about it. So they're still making music, still releasing music. And I'm assumed still touring and still probably getting millions and millions of dollars off that song Iris, because Jesus, that was overplayed. All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks for watching.